So, before we go on to the next section, actually, I have to apologize to Jules. I forgot to apply our lighting discussion to shooting with available light. So,
Like no,
and that's what I would call available light, meaning not lights that you bring in, but the lights that are already there. And so that could be light from the sun, or it could be the lights in the room, or whatever. And so I guess the first thing I would say is you look for a place that creates those things we were talking about there. So you don't want to put somebody someplace where they're just lit full on from the front and there's no shape to them. Put a window over to their side and use that as a key light or something like that, and then find a background where they have some separation from it and so on. Especially if you've got light coming in from a window, you're probably going to have an awful lot of bounce, and so you probably don't need a fill light. But yeah, you just kind of look for a situation that does that. Now, if you need some help, then you use one of those flex fill things like you were talking about, Daryl, a big pop-out disc or whatever, or you can even, I went to one of the rental, the film rental places in Denver and asked about renting big flex fill boards, and they said, just go to Home Depot and get the big sheet of like insulation that has the foam on one side or the silver, the foil on one side or whatever, and you can use that as a great big reflector or something like that if you need it, or you can use the white side if you want just sort of a soft bounce fill or whatever. So that could be a cheap cheap way to do that. They're not incredibly durable, but they are nice and cheap, so it's not the end of the world that they're. Yeah, it's like the, like inch thick or whatever styrofoam thing. Yeah, they come in like 4x8 sheets or something like that. So I'd usually use half of it or so. But yeah, those flex fill things are really handy. I'll pull that out later when we're talking about gear. Now, of course, the trick with that is if you're by yourself, then you probably need a stand or something to hold it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Or you have to be able to prop it up or something like that. But those can be really useful for shooting outdoors. In fact, a friend of mine was the director of photography on a film that they shot mostly available light outdoors. And he said what they did a lot of was they used the sun as the backlight, actually, and then used a bounce fill as sort of their, kind of both their key and their fill. It was just diffuse enough that it just filled them up and, still gave them some shape, and of course the light from the sky and everything. So yeah, they, sun is the backlight, and then a bounce as the fill or the key can work pretty well. Cool trick, no matter how you're lighting, whether it's using available light or you're setting up lights or something like that. And that is, you want to see what the light's looking like as you're setting it up or as you're walking around. You just make a fist and hold it out, and you see, oh, okay, I've got a lot of light coming there, the shadow's falling that way, I've got some, some edges over here, or, whatever it is. You just hold that up and look, yeah, there we go, something like that, might be pretty good or whatever. So, yeah.
Another thing is just wait.
or just wait, yes. Yep. Actually, that's one I didn't put too many on my list of apps, but there's a cool app you can get there are different ones for Android and for iPhone. I know the one for iPhone is called Sun Scout that will tell you where the sun's going to go, which is really handy. All right. Does that help somewhat with the shooting available light thing? Good. All right. Let's go on to storytelling. Or, actually, we're going to talk about more than editing, but yeah. I tell stories like a pro. I love stories. This is really why I'm into film and video. I love telling stories. So, okay. So, can anybody? Oh, right. Oh, I forgot. We have our pop quiz, our don't do it. So this is focusing a little bit on editing here. What is What is it? Okay, this one might be a little loud. Let's be careful here. You have to tell me what it is that I'm telling you not to do. Yeah. Yep. Very, very, very good. The too many bizarre transitions.
So,
yep.
Rule just because you can do it.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Most video editing programs have like 100 transitions.
Like these checkerboard.
Yep.
Oh my God.
And you guys use them all, right?
You're right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. All of them. Yep.
When in doubt.
Yeah. If, it should be your content in your video that's interesting, not the transitions. If you're relying on the transitions to make your video interesting, you're doing it wrong. So anyway, yes, crazy transitions. That arrow one, I like that one. I want to find a place to use that. All little arrows go. All right. Every once in a while, something like that. It's like, yes, that's perfect. It really fits here, but not usually. Okay. So, as far as storytelling.
At first it kind of did, because they were closing that thing, and then kind of folded the transition.
Yeah, yep.
Right.
Yeah, then it just, yeah. Yep. They did a lot of them in Star Wars, but they sort of established that as a style, you know, all those different wipes, different directions and everything like that. Yeah. All right, okay, so creating drama. Do you want drama in your video about your business? I don't know.
Good drama.
Yeah, good drama, yeah.
Maybe no.
Well, you mean interest.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you mean by drama, right, yeah. So, yeah, if we talk about drama, here's my sort of definition of drama. This is sort of, I don't know, pretty normal. It has a lot of elements that you hear from a lot of people. So yeah, what is drama? Drama is you have a hero, a protagonist, something like that. They're pursuing some kind of goal, and there are obstacles in their way, and they have to take some risks and so forth. And then eventually you arrive at some kind of resolution. So is this stuff that you want in your video? About, yeah, probably on some level, yeah. So for a video for your business, who's the hero? The protagonist. The product, yeah. Sometimes the client, yeah. That can be an interesting setup. Make the client the hero of the story, yep. Or the product, the business itself, yep. I think you've listed all of them that I have. That was fast. Yeah, so your business, your product, your customer, yep. So how about the goal? What's the goal?
The problem your business or product is solving.
Yeah.
Or what it is you want, whoever the audience is, you know, the person who, whatever it is, whatever action is you want them to take.
Yeah, whatever, okay, yeah. So you have your goal of what you want them to take.
Yeah.
But yeah, or your...
Whatever the client's goal.
Yeah, from the perspective of whoever the hero is, there's like, yeah, the problem that we're trying to solve or whatever, yeah, sort of the, yeah, it's, I really only came up with one thing for that, just sort of the purpose of your, you know, of your product or service, yeah, what you're trying to do. So then what are the obstacles and risks? Something like that. So it's really important to define the stakes. And so in the story, in the drama of your business here, depends a little bit on who the hero is. You know, we said the hero might be the business, it might be the product, it might be the customer, actually. And so it depends a little bit there exactly what the obstacles and risks will be. Of course, the obvious one is the problem that it solves, you know, that your product or service solves. So you can't wake up in the morning. Well, the coffee helps with that. You know, but see, this is something we want to define. You know, do you want to pitch your coffee as solving the problem of alertness or solving the problem of cool factor. You know, you're not cool unless you drink our coffee. Whatever. Yeah, right.
Starbucks already figured that out.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but now they're so big now, I think you can.
Like this morning we drove by a Starbucks and there were 50 people sitting out on the patio.
Oh, man.
We're going for the anti-Starbucks.
Here's an interesting one. Depending on exactly what the story is that you're telling, the obstacles and risks might be the work that your company puts in. You know, so maybe you're telling a story about how you developed a product and all the work that went into that and everything. So then, of course, all this doesn't really satisfy us unless there's some kind of resolution. Now, of course, in the case of a business, we usually don't want a tragedy at the end. Man, we tried and tried and tried for years to make the perfect hula hoop, and we failed. Anyway, maybe if by accident along the way you invented a better roller skate, that would be okay. Okay, so what does the resolution need to do?
Happily ever after.
Happily ever after. Yeah, well, ever after, that's kind of an important, this, like, things have changed, you know?
Transformation.
Yeah, transformation. That's, yeah, yeah, the problem is solved, yep. And of course, a lot of times the way that you're doing that is by saying, this solves the problem.
Or it isn't resolved.
Well, yeah, your problem isn't resolved. You're still in the conflict part of the story. We have the resolution part for you. Don't you want resolution? Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, you know that the goal has been reached. That's definitely an important part of the resolution. Life is better than it was before, and everything is different. We can't go back to the way things were before. It's all changed. That's, you know, in a good movie, you have that character arc, and at the end of the movie, the main character, and usually many of the other characters, are irrevocably changed. And maybe, I mean, the cynic in me says, well, that's saying a little bit much about most products on the planet, but I don't know, that's kind of what you're trying to pitch, is, you know, this, whatever this is, it will change you, you know, and your life will not be the same if you have this. And so how can we jazz up a boring cooking video with this?
Well, if you're telling a story, then it's for a party or something, or for
Okay.
someone, and you add a character.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah. 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 So you could add a character. Yeah, you're cooking this for somebody.
If you're cooking for a kid won't eat anything but garbage, and boom, kid likes it.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Yeah.
10 announced guests coming over.
No time.
Right? Yeah, there you go. Yep. Yeah, there's your problem. Yeah. And of course it's going to be even better. Okay, so let's pick one of those. What should we pick? Which one? 10 unannounced guests, the kid who won't eat the 10 unannounced guests.
Yes.
Unannounced guests, you have a short amount of time. Okay, so who's our protagonist? Who's our hero? The host, the chef. Okay, all right. Yeah, maybe it's not the host. Maybe it's the poor. You know. Yeah. So we have to make this. It probably has to be general enough because we're trying to make this relatable to, you know, a broad group of people. So just the sort of status type of thing, that might be a good, stakes. Oh, you know, you made a really good meal last time, and you've got to beat it this time or whatever. Otherwise, you know.
Can you talk a little bit about the time factor? I mean, if you're doing it in 30 seconds, that's radically different than if you're doing it in 30 minutes.
Absolutely, that's very true. Mm-hmm. So how do you divide this up?
Yeah, how do you think about what's an ideal length of time for this?
Yeah, well, depends on how complex the story is that you're telling, I guess. It's usually a good rule to simplify.
Stories told in just like a 30-second commercial.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Well, so that, yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. Are we feeling good about
They're
the?
coming over in 30 seconds. This is
Yeah.
real.
Microwave, click. You do this today.
Yeah, it's one of those amazing things that will, perfect.
Okay, so we've got our stakes defined, we've got our problem, we've got our hero, and so then our resolution. How do we make this resolution not simply we serve the guests, but everything is different? And then we'll go on to your question, Tom. So the sort of classic thing that pretty much everybody fits this into is a 3-act structure. And so you've got your act 1, which sort of sets up the problem and so forth, throws the hero into the problem, sets them off on their journey. Then act 2 is just the journey, basically. And then act 3 is the rising conflict, getting to a climax, and then the end. And usually, if you were to graph this, I have to do it from your perspective here. So you start out act 1, and our tension is kind of low here, and we build. We maybe have some ups and downs or whatever. Oh, we had some success, and we kind of relax. Okay, we're good. Oh, now there's a new problem. The souffle didn't come out correctly or something like. Yeah, right. The souffle fell. Yeah. And so more tension, and we keep kind of going up. We keep going up, and then at the end, after our climax and our resolution here, then we come back down, but not usually back down to the same level where we started. We're kind of now that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're kind of worked up. If it's a happy ending, like we're saying, most of them probably should be. If it's a happy ending, then maybe our level is a little higher simply because we're jazzed up and we're excited. Cool, we did it. That sort of thing. So yeah, so we're rising like this. Now, usually the way that you divide that up is that the first act is 1/4 of the time, roughly. The second act is half the time, and the third act is, again, 1/4 of the time. And usually you kind of identify big changes at each of these act breaks. That's kind of how, that things go off in a new direction. That's where you can identify, what these act breaks are. The going into act 2 is usually kind of the hero sort of embracing their quest, sort of, okay, all right, I'm not going to try and avoid the problem. I'm actually going to go after it. Anyway, let's move on to editing techniques. All right, you finally get to see the video here. So, had to do something that I could use for the class here, and that I could experiment with a bunch of different techniques in order to have a bunch of examples. That's a lot of the stuff that you've seen before was in the course of shooting this video. So here you go. Here's a fun little thing that maybe sort of falls within the some of these things that you might be doing. It's not exactly a business thing, but you could see it as such. Maybe like it was a training related video or something.
Jonathan is coming up on 2 years old, so he's right at the age when he's going to become interested in books.
We are working on a book browser.
It's kind of like a bookshelf, except that it has these bins. He can kind of look at the cover of each book that way, rather than just the edge of it. My son Peter, who is Jonathan's father, is working on it, and I'm Jonathan's grandfather, and I've been his grandfather for his entire life.
We've got our plan at the beginning, but that's not enough.
The one we made before, it was very difficult to drill the holes for the pegs precisely enough.
Our initial plan for how to put it all together, we kind of rethought it.
The whole thing with the pegs didn't work very well. So we learned from that experience, and this time we did without the pegs, and just carefully piecing things together and then drilling the holes and putting the screws in place right away so that it stays. I worked on woodworking with my father, and now my son is working on woodworking with me. It's kind of a passing of the baton here.
Growing up, I was always around while he was doing woodworking things, and now that memory growing up is something I'm passing on to Jonathan here. We're when the project's all done, you're still not sure if it's a success until Jonathan comes in and kind of looks at it and kind of says, "Look, what's that?" And I put the books in. He goes, "Oh, okay, there are books in here now. I should flip through these." And he gets that instantaneous excitement. He loves exploring. He loves physically and mentally climbing to new heights. I think that curiosity is just going to keep pushing him further and further.
Thanks. So yeah, that's the final tip to storytelling. Get a 2-year-old nephew to end your story for you, and then yeah, it was amazing. So yeah,
Secondary aspect of that is generational continuity.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. That was definitely a theme that I put in there. The thing about the issues, like so the previous one was actually for my nephew, so that was my brother and his wife's son, and then my sister and her husband also have a son, and that was the previous one that was built that they were referring to, which I don't really explain in the video, but you don't need to. You know, I'm just setting up that there was this problem here. I actually had to, when I was interviewing them, everything I kept getting was, "Oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. Oh, it went really smoothly. It's really," I was like, "No, I need to find something," you know. And so that was something I had to kind of look for, you know. Hey, surely there were obstacles along the way, and there were some other things that I ended up not using. Like my brother talked about that patience is a challenge for him. You know, it's hard for him to have the patience to do all the measurement and do all that properly. But I didn't have a lot of footage of measurement, and so I didn't use that. Anyway, like measuring things. So anyway, okay. So editing. This is my order anyway, kind of for editing. And so you asked Daryl about what do you do first? I tell the story first. So you talked about putting that audio first, and that's exactly what I do first. I start by finding what is my story going to be, and I put all that stuff together in order. And what do I do next?
So when you tell the story, do you actually write a script?
You can.
Do you do bullet points or?
Yeah, and so it depends on what it is. You know, in some cases, yeah, you would definitely just write an actual script. You know, if it's something that's more interview-based, you can still write a script, but it's sort of a skeleton script. You know, like we want to have a sound bite about this. You know, I did that for the DaVinci coders thing. You know, okay, we want to have a sound bite about challenges in employment these days or something like that. You know, and that's going to set up our problem. You know, and then we want to have a sound bite about the opportunity with all the all the coding jobs out there. And so I didn't know exactly what was going to be said, but I knew those were the sort of things that I wanted. So yeah. So after putting all that together, it's 10 minutes long. And so what do you do next? You cut it to shreds. You just cut it ruthlessly. I mean, you go through that thing and you find everything that you can cut out, because that's how you keep it interesting. After you have done that, you're going to find that you have a whole bunch of jump cuts. And yeah, good question. I will explain what a jump cut is a little bit later. Hold on to that. Sort of analogous to that, so the jump cuts are more of a video thing. You also have a bunch of, you could call them jump cuts in audio, just harsh cuts, you know, because you cut your audio everywhere, and you always have like some background noise or whatever, and if that's just cut, it's really weird. And so then you fade all your audio cuts. And then you do some refining stuff. And so that usually would be, it's a really good idea to color correct your video. I think even pretty much all the free software out there these days does at least some amount of color correction. That can make a huge difference in how your video looks. Just taking the time to correct it, take different shots and balance them, so if one looks really warm, kind of yellowish, and another looks really cool and bluish or whatever, you balance them out so that they match each other a little better, that sort of thing. It is amazing how that can take, you look at something and you go, oh man, it sure looks lousy, and like I shot it with this little cheap camera, and then you do some color correction. Wow, it looks great! Balance the audio levels, so kind of the same thing again. Probably you're going to have some stuff that's real loud, some stuff that's real quiet. Particularly when you're doing stuff for the internet, you have no idea what kind of speakers people are going to have. A lot of them are just listening on their computer speakers or whatever. And so they're not going to do a great job of reproducing a bunch of different, some really loud stuff and some really quiet stuff. So you have to bring that all into a fairly narrow range. They call that compression of the audio. And you can sort of do that by hand, or you can apply compressor filters that will do that for you. Not to be confused with video compression, which is a completely different thing. And then it's a good idea, because you're probably going to have some differences in there, to add some room tone throughout. Does anybody know what room tone is? It's an audio related thing. So with all this audio that you've recorded, and it's at different volumes and everything like that, and there are places where there's no audio and there are places where there is audio and so on. Like I said, there's pretty much always background noise. And so that can become pretty noticeable. Even if you do little fades, it can become noticeable that, that a clip starts that has some audio and it goes, and then the person talks, and then they stop talking and it goes, and then the next one starts, and so you hear that, yeah, exactly. And so when you're shooting, you just stay silent for 30 seconds or so and record audio of just the sound of the room, just the ambient noise. And then you can use that if you have any noticeable gaps like that to put it in there. If you, well, I don't know if we can tell in this environment. I did not do that on this video. So if you listen closely, you can tell places where the background noise comes and goes. But anyway, now where does the music come in here? I didn't list music. Maybe it's up here, or maybe it's down there. I don't know. It kind of depends. Sometimes the music will actually drive your edit. You'll put the music in there and then you start timing things to the music. And so in that case, you maybe put it in a little sooner and then you start making sure things line up with the music. Or maybe you just add it at the end, and then sometimes you still go back and tweak things a little bit to make sure it matches nicely. If you're lucky enough to have somebody composing music for you, then they make sure it matches. Okay, so here is an example of cutting out the fluff, all the extra stuff. So here is the original uncut answer to the question.
It's called a book browser, and it's kind of like a bookshelf, except that it has these bins that you put the books in on the top of it. And it's for children in particular. It's kind of low to the ground so that a young child, like even a 2-year-old, can browse through the books that are in these bins. And so he can kind of flip the books forward and look at the cover of each book that way, rather than just the edge of it like you would if you had filed books on a bookshelf.
Holy cow, that was long. Here it is with all.
It's kind of like a bookshelf, except that it has these bins. He can kind of look at the cover of each book that way, rather than just the edge of it.
So that's what I cut it down to. So yeah, there's a lot cut out of that. Did you see the jump cuts? Yeah. Now you know what a jump cut is.
That's when you fill in something out, put another scene in.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, a jump cut, sort of broadly speaking, is really any cut where things seem to jump unnaturally from one shot to another. And so that was a really clear example. If you just take time out of a shot, it ends up being a jump cut because the person moves. You know, they're still there in the same place and everything like that, but all of a sudden they're here. And so that's very weird. Now there can be other things that can cause a jump cut. Maybe you're shooting from different angles or something like that. If you don't change enough, actually. So this is kind of interesting. It's like if you don't change enough or you change too much. It's weird. If you don't change enough, like when you're going to a different angle, and so kind of this rule of thumb is that your framing needs to change by roughly 30%. So for instance, you could go from a wider shot to a closer shot or something like that, as long as it's enough of a change. Or you could go from here to a different angle, as long as it's enough of a change. We can't do just a little bit. We have to go, yeah.
You can go to your B.
Exactly, you go to your B camera or whatever. If you see a person or whatever in one place and then you go to a different shot and they're in another place, a lot of times that ends up reading as a jump cut. Who was it? Were you talking about the shot between the shot, Daryl? Who was? Oh, that was Steve. Steve was talking about the shot between the shot where you have, or the shot between the shots, where you have the person gets out of the car and then the next shot you see him ringing the doorbell, and we kind of fill in what happened in between. That has to be done very carefully. If it's not done carefully, in particular if we see the person in the frame at the end of the previous shot and at the beginning of the new shot, a lot of times that's going to seem weird. It's like, wait a minute, they were here, now they're here, what happened? We have to usually see them leave the frame in one shot or the other. We have to see something different in between, yeah, or whatever. As time has gone on, I mean, if you watch an old movie, you see every single step of the way. They get out of the car, they walk up to the door, they open the door, they go inside the building, they go in the elevator, they go up the elevator, they go into the office. Yeah, they do all that stuff. Now these days, audiences are accustomed to not having to see all of that in between. We can cut a lot of that out, but you have to be careful. You know, you just kind of watch it and see, wow, did that seem weird? Did it seem like somebody teleported? Then you've got a jump cut. So you can fix it by either keeping continuity, making sure it doesn't look like somebody teleports, show the stuff in between, the walking up to the door and the opening the door and so on, or you go to something else, like you were saying. You go to a cutaway or something like that. So here are some examples of jump cuts.
My son Peter, who is Jonathan's father, is working on it, and I'm Jonathan's grandfather.
There is a jump.
And I've been his grandfather for his entire life.
We've got our plan at
Now
the
to me
beginning,
that
but
reads as a jump also,
that's
because
not enough.
The one we made
even though it's a different
before,
person, we're in the same
very
place.
difficult to drill the holes for the pegs precisely enough.
Our
And so it
initial
looks as
plan
though
for
somebody
how to put it all
magically
together,
disappeared and the other person appeared in that
kind
same
of
spot.
rethought
And
it.
so those are kind of a problem. And so anyway, I just take that same thing here.
My son Peter, who is Jonathan's father, is working on it, and I'm Jonathan's grandfather, and I've been his grandfather for his entire life.
We've got our plan at the beginning, but that's not enough.
The one we made before, it was very difficult to drill the holes for the pegs precisely enough.
Our initial plan for how to put it all together, we kind of rethought it.
There is an interesting cut there that appears like a cut in continuity. You know, looking at how the wood is fitting together there, and then we go actually to my dad's face. Those were actually shot, I don't know, half an hour apart or something like that. That was something completely different that he was looking at, but it worked. You know, I just needed a shot of him looking at something. And so it looks as though it's a cut in continuity. So you can get away with that a lot if you have a lot of footage. Yeah, yep. Oop, why are we playing again? Oh, there was a little extra tail at the end. Huh, okay. Anyway, the cut to Jonathan in the middle of that, actually, I had to put in because the other stuff, if I put it just right together, there was some stuff where their hands weren't in the same position. And so it ended up being a jump cut. So I cut away to Jonathan, cut back, and yeah, they could have moved their hands by now. So, yeah.
So what did you call that shot that you put into the middle of two others?
Are you talking about when I was talking about the shot between the shots, or? That's actually that is a hypothetical shot that the audience fills in when that's not actually there. Oh, you're talking about here. Okay.
With the voiceover, dad speaking, but then we no longer see your dad facing the camera.
Right.
We're hearing.
Yeah, it's B-roll is a common term for that, or a cutaway, or something like that. Yeah, those are two common terms for it. One of the things, you know, show. Well, I'm gonna mention this later. Show, don't tell. You just show. You know, somebody's talking about something. You know, my dad's talking about my brother there, and so I show my brother helping out. You know, he's talking about my brother helping, and so rather than watch him talk about it, let's see it happen. You know. So, yeah, it's a cutaway or B-roll back from the days of tape editing. You know, you'd have an A-roll, which was one tape, you know, on a roll there, and then the B-roll was your other tape. So in a news cast, the A-roll is the reporter there, you know, saying, you know, today at Farmer Joe's farm, the bison grew wings and started flying, you know, and then the B-roll is the actual video of the bison flying. So, okay, with all of this stuff, you may have noticed a lot of this stuff, you need to have it in order to use it. You know, I've been talking about a lot of things to do in your editing, but if you didn't shoot for this stuff, you don't have it. You can't do this stuff in your editing. So in a sense, you have to take all this and apply it back to what we talked about before with shooting. You know, before I was really just kind of talking about the mechanics of shooting, but all this stuff relates to, okay, what are you actually shooting? Yeah, exactly. Create a storyboard, create a script. The more you can plan this stuff, the better off you're going to be. So like I say, you can't tell your story if you don't have all the plot points. So you have to have that figured out beforehand. Or you have to shoot a whole bunch and figure out what your story is afterwards, which is hard. And if you don't have good B-roll cutaways, then you can't cover your edits. And so you need a lot of different stuff. And it needs to be from a variety of angles and so forth. One thing I could have done to help with those interviews, I could have shot my dad and my brother in different locations. And then I could have cut between the two better. Or I could have shot some wider and some tighter, and I could have cut between those two, even if it wasn't really in continuity, even if it was something they said 5 minutes apart. As long as they're not looking in a completely different direction, I could cut between those two shots if one's like this and one's like this.
This is you know, telling about a product or your service or a topic.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets kind of boring, everyone's just looking at you. So would you have like cutaways to grass or
sure.
I don't know, of course shots of the product, if it's a product, or maybe something else when you're in action working with a group, or you know, if you're a service.
Happy customers.
Happy customers.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's all the, you know, show don't tell. You know, I mean, yeah, you're going to tell it. We're going to hear what you're saying, but we want to see it. We don't want to just see you talk about it.
Even a still photograph, you know, a drawing.
Sure.
A plan for what
Yep.
you're making. And as you're talking
Yep.
about it.
Any way you can find to make it visual is good. All right. I have some quick examples of advanced techniques. I'm not going to talk a lot about them, and I think that's the last that I have for editing. And so these are things like a split edit, shooting with multiple cameras, shooting with a green screen, chroma key, using multiple audio sources. A lot of these things are fairly easy to accomplish if you have some more pro-level editing software, and you know how to do them. With lower end software, they can be much harder to do. So
What's the most bang for your buck for software?
I will talk about that later. I'm glad you asked. There are varying opinions on that, but I can give you mine. So a split edit is when the audio and the video cut at different times. This is less common in sort of business type videos because usually you have more of the one person talking and then cutaways to something entirely different. It's more common if you have a conversation between a couple of people. So anyway, here we go. This is actually from a narrative thing instead of a commercial
You,
thing.
sir, look terrible.
So you see, we hear him before we see him.
You'll find someone better, man.
Thanks.
Still able to get your money back?
Again, we hear him after we stop seeing him.
Thank God for that.
And so those are all split edits, and you can have your video and your audio end at different times. It's possible to do with lower end software, but it can get a little bit tricky and sometimes. Yep. Yep, exactly. That can really help to hide your cuts. If the audio keeps going, then people don't even notice that you're cutting back and forth. And you're using it to show what the audience wants to see. Multiple cameras. Here's an example with actually the DaVinci Code.
I needed to find an alternate route or some sort of other, career, in order to grow.
I had a great career in what I was doing, sales, marketing. I was 8 years with the company. I was doing very well, but I didn't feel complete doing it. I felt like I was missing something.
I wanted to learn a trade that was actually very, very useful and very in high demand.
So yeah, 2 cameras running at once, which means you could mix things up a little bit. That also meant, I think in at least one of those examples there, I actually cut out some stuff in between that was said. There was a lot of stuff in there and it didn't get to the point as quickly as we needed to, and so I cut out stuff in between. And because I switched cameras and they were close enough to the same position, you don't notice. So, just some general guidelines here. I already mentioned one of them, show, don't tell. I mean, you can still tell, you can have the person talking, but you don't want to just hear it, you want to see it too. Anticipate what your audience wants to see, which is maybe kind of another way of saying show, don't tell. In that, the thing I had there with the 2 guys talking in the apartment, in some cases, like we don't care really, we don't need to see what the one guy is looking like. We care more how the other guy is reacting. And actually that's my last point, is that reaction shots can guide your audience's emotions. And so that's a thing to do, with any sort of business video or whatever. You show people reacting to what it is that you're doing, reacting to the product or whatever, enjoying it, that sort of thing. And that tells the audience how they're supposed to feel about it. All right. Any questions about that?
Could you go back and talk a little bit, you had a
I
lot.
looked at that, I looked at recording the audio separate, like with Tascam and stuff like that kind of equipment. And in the end, I just decided, putting the audio into the camera in a more effective way, making it all one, I didn't have to then.
Yep, and if you have the inputs to do that, yeah, and if you can, and so yeah, if you've got just 2 lavalier microphones, you're going to run those into the camera, and you've got left and right stereo, great. But if you've got that, plus you've got the plant mic in the center, and you've got the, whatever, then, yeah.
I guess how professional and for what purpose.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
To do the best you can do.
Yeah, we should, yep.
Let's take just a 10-minute break.